Hey, what's up YouTube? Today we are doing yet another video. Today's kind of exciting. We are going to introduce a lab. Essentially, we're going to start from, it's going to be a multi-part series, and it's going to cover SQL injection. So with that being said, this first video is just going to pretty much be an overview of everything that's going to go into this lab. Alright, so first things first, pretty much the table of contents, everything that we're going to cover in today's video. So the first slide will cover the purpose of this lab, pretty much explaining why I went about it and why I did this lab. Then we're going to explain the lab environment, pretty much everything that's going to be involved, including the virtual machines, the various services that we're going to host, and then the attacking machine. Then I will also cover on the next slide what will be covered in this series. So not only is it going to be a 1-2 video, it might be like 5 videos maybe, or maybe even more depending on how far I want to go with this. And then also we will give a basic understanding of SQL today, just kind of explaining why this is important and why this lab could benefit you. And then last but not least would be any future plans and ideas that I may have for this lab. So the purpose of this lab, so a few months back I came up with an idea. Pretty much I wanted to have a better understanding of SQL injection, but not only from an attacking perspective, but also from a defending perspective. So with that being said, I wanted to just be a part of every process that goes into this. So I wanted to develop the web application. I wanted to develop the database, the backend server for that, and everything in between. So the tables, the information, and then just pretty much attack it and see what goes into it all. So with that being said, there are options out there, like the damn vulnerable web application, and then there's WebGo, and there's a few other Docker images that you could spin up. But like I said, I wanted to start from scratch. I wanted to build everything in between, and then this way it also allows me to customize it as I go, pretty much just learning different attack vectors or different ways to defend against these attacks. Alright, so now we got the lab environment. So this may look different for you, but in my case I have an ESXi server which is hosted on a Dell R620, and then inside of that server we are going to create a virtual machine. It's just going to use Ubuntu. The IP address that we're going to use, or the scheme that we're going to use, is 10.0.0.2. The Apache web server is going to be open on port 80, which is also on this virtual machine. And then the other service that we're going to host is going to be the SQL, MySQL database. And then inside of there, we're going to have the database named webapp01. The tables is going to be users. And then the columns, which is going to store the username and the password. And then lastly is obviously the attacker machine, which is just a Windows virtual machine, and the IP address of 10.0.0.3. With that being said, in the real world, obviously we wouldn't be using private IPs, we would be using public IPs, considering everything will be going over the internet. But for a lab environment, this works out perfect. So just to cover everything that's going to go into this series, we're going to start with the SQL structure and syntax. So pretty much just a quick video kind of showing you guys what exactly goes on behind the scenes, how data is pulled and information is searched in the database tables. Then we're going to go ahead and actually develop and deploy the SQL database that we're going to be using in this lab. And then the same thing goes for the web application on Apache, and that's going to be using PHP and HTML. And then lastly, we're going to obviously attack it, not only manually, but we're going to use some tools. Popular tools is going to be Burp Suite, and then another one will be SQL Map. And then we'll just expand on it from there. So now that we have covered everything that's going to go into this series, I did want to give you guys a basic understanding of SQL for those that do not know. So in almost every business scenario you can think of today, one example being the local grocery store, there's going to be some form of database on the backend server, pretty much storing various information. So in this particular example, maybe the count of each item or the prices that are associated with each item, and so on and so on. This would obviously assist management and others that are involved in the process for ordering or just managing the overall inventory of the store. So why does this matter? Well, it doesn't store just a count of an apple and a banana. Instead, it may store your bank information, username, passwords, and anything else in between that. So attackers obviously know this, so they will exploit it via some form of SQL injection. There's a number of methods that can be used to not only gain access, but also to dump this information, which I will explain a little bit in a minute. So how does this happen? Often the web application which interacts with the server uses poor security practices. So A web application that accepts login details may treat the user input, so the input that you and I are putting in to log into this web application, may be seen as SQL syntax. So it's pretty much seeing it directly for what it is, and instead of a string. If that doesn't make sense, it will be better explained when we actually go through the lab. So if this occurs, then the attacker pretty much has the ability to change the backend, allowing them to display results other than what was intended by the developer. So instead of maybe displaying the inventory of an apple or a banana, now they can display the username and password of the administrator, or whatever the case may be. So obviously, with that being said, this can lead to entire databases being leaked online, filled with usernames and passwords and other personal information. Not only can it leak information, but it also may provide a way for these attackers to gain unauthenticated access, and this may allow them to move not only laterally but even escalate to administrative rights, which is obviously something that we want to prevent. So the last slide is just going to cover some future plans or even ideas that I have for this lab. Not all of this may come to fruition, but with that being said, it's just an idea, so maybe we will, maybe we won't, depending on maybe what you guys say. But one thing I would like to do is at least create another database for two reasons. One, I want to show a proof of concept regarding dumping user information, so we could use SQL map, or we could even do manual injection just to gain a better understanding of how that all works, instead of not only gaining unauthenticated access, but I would also like to provide a way to show you guys how attackers can actually dump the entire database. Another thing that I would like to do is create a Docker image for this web application, just pretty much everything all involved, so that if in the future we want to just spin it up on a different virtual machine or anything like that, you could just go ahead and download it, spin it up, and then go ahead and just practice. And then last but not least, one of the ideas I definitely want to cover is the whole purpose of this lab was to harden the web application and the database. One secure practice example would be like using prepared statements. So that is something that's going to come on later on down the road. For now, we're just going to cover the things that I talked about in the beginning of this video, such as deploying and developing the web application, the database, and then just using some basic attack vectors on that database. Before I close out this video, I did also want to provide just a few references or links. One of them being the Portswigger, so pretty much the developers of Burp Suite. They have a great academy just to learn pretty much anything about SQL injection, and there's not only SQL injection but a bunch of different attack vectors. I would definitely go ahead and sign up for that. It is free. You'd be missing out if you do not do that. Then lastly would be the two Docker images I talked about in the beginning of this video. So you got damn vulnerable web application, just a you go ahead and download this. The instructions should be somewhere down here. There you go. Installation procedures down here. So pretty much just going to be the Docker images that you guys could use if you wanted to, instead of using our own within this lab. This is something that you can refer to in the future, or maybe even supplement after this lab. Go ahead and spin these up and just get a different perspective of what these have to offer. Alright, so that's going to close out today's video. Like I said, this is going to be a multi-part video, so the first part hopefully coming out this week, and then so on and so forth throughout the remaining weeks of this month, or maybe even next month, depending on how busy I get. With that being said, I am very excited to share this lab with you guys. I hope whoever does watch this video in the future can take something away, and as always, never stop learning.